For several months now, Nigerian students have been kept at home by the government as efforts to contain COVID-19 pandemic intensifies. But even with that, the dispute between the Academic Staff Union of Universities, the umbrella body of lecturers in Nigeria, and the federal government has rumbled on. The bone of contention being the attempt by the government to bring the teachers under the integrated payroll and personal information salary payment structure, a move vehemently rejected at first, but with further consultations between the contending party, has recently been accepted, rather grudgingly, by the university teachers. But in the meantime, for no fault of anyone in particular, a lot of students are at home, having been separated for their curricula for so long, and have been made up of all manners of misdemeanor and sometimes serious violations of law. Against this backdrop, what could be urgently done to salvage the remains of Nigeria's academic calendar, especially now that the world is shaping up for wholesale changes after the pandemic? Joining us to review this and lots more is Professor Munzali Jibril, a former Pro-Chancellor of Federal University, Lafia, Nasarawa State, who is also former Secretary of National Universities Commission. Welcome to the program, Prof. It's an honor and a pleasure to talk to you. I want to start by this, Prof. The president of ASU said the workability of online learning is practically impossible because of infrastructure. And a lot of people have been touting online learning during this COVID period as a silver bullet. Do you allude to the president of ASU, or you want to say otherwise as regards online learning?
Well, I think the fact is not is somewhere in between. The truth is that for most public universities, the infrastructure does not exist for online learning. But some are actually very, very advanced in terms of the use of digital devices and technology. And with a very little adjustment, they could actually provide online learning. The pandemic is going to change the way we do a lot of things, not just in education, but in everything. But it is interesting to note that many of the private universities had no difficulty switching over the following week after the institutions were closed down. They had no difficulty in switching over to online learning. And you don't really need too many gadgets or devices. Already, most of the students have personal computers or telephones that have internet capabilities. So all they did was to say, okay, we're going to use Zoom for our lectures. And these are universities, these private universities, even before the pandemic, had been receiving assignments from students by email anyway. So part of their learning strategies included a lot of digital resources. So they didn't have much difficulty, but it's the public universities that are more conservative and more resource deprived, and they are the ones that have difficulty switching over to online learning. But this can be done.
Well, Prof, I mean, COVID-19 has disrupted virtually every sector, and the university calendar, the school calendar has also been affected. Only yesterday, the Minister of State for Education was talking about the possibility of reopening schools at some point. But given the fact that since the easing of the lockdown, we've been recording on the average about 400 cases of COVID-19 on a daily basis, do you think that schools should reopen in spite of COVID-19, considering that many of our classrooms are not even designed to ensure physical distancing and social distancing?
Yes, well, as many governments throughout the world have realized, lockdown can only be a temporary measure, because while you're trying to protect lives, you also have to preserve livelihood. So it's not a sustainable thing to continue lockdown forever. The one that we had in Nigeria gave government time to organize better, to create testing facilities. We started with 2, now we have 32 or more, and also to expand isolation centers and special hospitals for the patients. But the key issue really is the people themselves. My sense is that quite a number of Nigerians still don't believe in all the preventive measures that government has been advocating. A very well-educated friend of mine visited me some time ago, and he's an engineer actually, and he said to me, do you actually believe that this COVID-19 exists? Or do you think it's just some kind of device invented by government as a way of embezzling money? And I was really shocked. So this is the problem. If you drive around town, like Abuja here, and you see people sitting in front of houses or in markets, they don't care at all. They don't observe social distancing. They don't even the mask is used, as a kind of necessary evil. And once they can get away with not using it, they will just remove it or just let it hang. So it would be good to see institutions reopen. But I think we have to put in place appropriate measures to ensure that students, staff, and everybody connected with the system is safe. But I think we should give serious thought to early opening of the higher institutions and even primary and secondary schools.
Indeed, Professor. Our previous guest referred to the cynicism that people direct at the government, and you've just confirmed that with those views that were expressed to you. And I also agree with your take on early opening as soon as possible, especially because of the huge inequality in society. We need to ensure some sort of continuity for people who don't have access to smartphones and what have you. But can we talk about the impact of comments like that Rufai referred to, that was made by the chairman of ASU, where he's made comments like garbage in and garbage out, and how lecturers don't have the skills, just a really damning assessment of pedagogy in Nigeria. Apart from the education that students are receiving now, what does it say about the kind of graduates that Nigeria produces and their fitness for the workplace or otherwise?
Well, I didn't hear about those comments. I'm hearing about them from you for the first time. But to some extent, it would be a fair assessment of the situation, because if you look at the educational inputs like the staffing and equipment and access to journals and books, up-to-date journals and books, that is, you will see that really most Nigerian universities are not doing too well. This has to do with the rate of expansion of the system, which of course, you see, we still don't have a big enough system to accommodate the number of students of that age group of 18 to 25 that we have. We're still not covering more than 15%. And it has been said that for you to actually launch yourself into development in the knowledge economy, you need to have above 50% of that age cohort in higher education. So we're still very far behind. But the problem is government is not committing sufficient resources. And the federal government is doing much better than state governments. State governments rush to establish universities, especially in the governor's hometown, but only as what ASU calls a constituency project. But they don't sustain them with good funding. And the private universities, well, they are too fragmented too small, and most of them are not viable because the business model on which they were based has failed, because they were based on an expectation that there would be so many students paying so much, and therefore the books would be balanced. But the truth is there's so much poverty in the land that even those who wish to send their children to these private schools cannot afford to. So it's a vicious circle. If we were a richer country with a very vibrant, strong, and populous middle class, then of course parents would be able to pay fees, even in public schools, which would go a long way to supplement whatever government provides. And this will now raise the standard of input, that is to say, quality of teachers, number of teachers, classroom and other physical facilities, as well as equipment and consumables. But because we are a relatively poor country, I mean, we may have oil, but in relation to our population, of course, it's a trickle. So it's a vicious circle. We need to break that vicious circle. For us to break out of poverty as a nation, we need a more educated, more skilled workforce. And for us to have a more educated and skilled workforce, we need to invest more money. So I would think that the ultimate solution would be for government to reprioritize. I think we are spending too much money on overheads, on servicing the civil service, and on things that really are not important for national development. So we have to reprioritize to find the money to inject into education, because education is everything.
All right, Professor, I want to go to the ASU conundrum with the federal government. eyepiece or no eyepiece, now it looks as though they're trying to reach a common ground on this. I mean, what's your take on all of this as it affects the educational system? Tunu made a very great point about pedagogy. What should be the outlook as regards how students are being taught to be able to compete in this era of the fourth industrial revolution, where robotics, Internet of Things, and big data is going to dominate the world? Yes.
Well, you asked two questions. What's my take on eyepiece? And then how do we relate the Nigerian situation to the reality of the knowledge economy? I'll answer them in that order. Well, you know, by accident, I chaired a consultative meeting on eyepiece about 6-7 months ago at the National Universities Commission. I say by accident because I was invited as a pro-chancellor, and somehow I found myself chairing the meeting because the executive secretary declined to chair it and insisted that I was the right person to do so. And from what I understood, government simply wishes to harmonize and integrate everyone on its payroll in the IPPIS. Now, at that time, the consultants to the project, as well as the officials of the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, appeared to be willing to accommodate all the peculiarities of the university system, because it was then still work in progress, and they seemed to be willing to accommodate whatever deficiencies were observed. But ASU's objection appears to be based on a principle that universities are autonomous, and therefore they must not be treated as part of the larger public service. Now, my own view is if all the peculiarities of the university system could be taken into account and harmonized with the IPPIS, and if the system could run smoothly without any hitches, I don't see anything wrong with it. But the the hitches that have emanated from the trial run of the IPPIS seem to vindicate ASU's position, because a lot of allowances were, simply taken out of the system. A lot of people that are very useful, like contract staff, retired professors, or people who, for other reasons, cannot be given a full-time appointment, visiting lecturers and so on, were all flushed out of the system. And these are all part of the peculiarities of the system. So I believe that some middle ground can be found. And ASU did say that it has developed its own payment platform, which is better than and superior to IPPIS. Well, okay, maybe at a meeting which the president had with the ASU leaders some months ago, I think the possibility of integrating these two was actually discussed or explored, but I haven't heard more about it. So that's my take on that one. As for the second part of your question, well, as a country, we need to really get our acts together. And as I said, prioritize the things that are really critical for development. Do we need the size of the civil service that we have at the moment? And do we need to go on with this budgeting system that appears to be susceptible to fraud? Because some people have analyzed certain ministries or agencies where the same item will be appearing for 5-10 years every year, and it just appears to be a device for attracting government money without achieving anything, because you can't have the same project recurring every year. So there's a lot of fraud going on, and we need to revisit that system. We need to have a smaller bureaucracy and a more focused approach to development. I can't go into details because this is not the subject, but the whole idea is so that we can release money for infrastructure and human capital development. Because these are the two critical issues, in my view, that will launch us into real development. And once we do that, I think we will find that we are already aligned with the best education systems in the world. Already, bad as our situation is, we are still highly respected and highly regarded abroad. The best of our best, when they go abroad, they are still the best in the world. When our children go for master's degrees in the UK or in other countries, if they already scored very high grades there, they are likely to also be at the top of their class where they go. So, and Nigerian professionals are highly regarded and highly respected. If you inquire about the perception of the image of Nigerian medical doctors, for example, in the United Kingdom, you will find that they are highly rated. And in fact, even the British doctors are amazed at how much they know and how skillful they are. So it's not a totally bad system, but it can be improved. We need to spend more and we need to organize better.
Well, Prof, you have been pro-chancellor of a federal university, and you've been involved in the university system. Let's go back to that demand by ASU. ASU is saying that their concern is not just about IPs, it's about the 2009 agreement. What do you think of that position? And then ASU insists that there is a proliferation of state universities that should be addressed. We have about between 48, 52 state universities, about 38 of them are accredited. But ASU is saying that government needs to address that. Do we have too many state universities, or do we even have too many universities, considering the gap between admissions and access to university education in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abati. This is, well, not a multiple barrel question, not even double barrel. Well, if I start from the last, and if I forget the rest, you will remind me, the proliferation of state universities. Well, in a federal system, how does the federal government control states to say you can't establish universities? Education is on the concurrent list, and there is not a chance that you could get legislation through the National Assembly to remove it and put it on the exclusive list. And it wouldn't make sense anyway. It would mean that the federal government would be responsible even for primary education. So the best that the government can do, federal government can do, is to use its agencies like the National Universities Commission, which are charged with the implementation of standards, to ensure that regardless of who owns a university, if it doesn't measure up to the minimum standards of staffing, equipment, and facilities, then that program is not accredited. That's the best that the government, federal government, can do. The state governments, most of them are capable of funding the universities they set up better, but there is so much irresponsibility in governance. There is ubiquitous lack of accountability, and, well, we all have to take the blame because the system as it is broken and it's not working. And we need to do what some other middle classes in the world have done: come together, devise some other strategies for holding our elected leaders to account. Okay, so I won't elaborate on that again because this is, again, not the forum. Now, you did ask at least two other questions, but I seem to have forgotten.
No, the other question was simply about ASU, saying that government should focus more on the 2009 agreement rather than talking about IPs.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay. Yes, you see the 2009 agreement. I was executive secretary of NUC between 1996 and 2001. And as I took over in 1996, there was an ASU strike on. But this was during the military regime. And the military, of course, would not resolve a strike by calling the union for negotiations. So they crushed it their own way. But in 1999, when the new civilian government took over, by which time, I mean, the ASU had been restored and all that, we had negotiations which produced the 2001 agreement. The 2009 agreement is actually an updated version of the 2001 agreement. Now, it amazes me how government proceeds to sign agreements that it knows it cannot and will not implement.
Prof, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We'll have to bring it to a close at this point. And thank you very much for joining us.